So at this point, we are ready to modify our base template. But before we actually get into making those modifications, we are going to talk about some of the Bootstrap features that we are going to be incorporating into the base and some of the other template pages. So how Bootstrap works is it does require that you wrap site contents in a container. And there's two different container classes. There is a class just called container, and that's a fixed width container. And then there is container dash fluid, which is a full width container that spans the entire width of the screen or the viewport. So kind of to give you guys a feel for this. So here is the fixed width container. And let's change this to the fluid one. So the fluid one is going to span the whole width, whereas the fixed width is typically centered and it's not the entire width. Now let's see. Let's see if we can get a nav bar in here so that you guys can actually see what this looks like. So all I did was add navbar BG dark. And so you can kind of see at least how this looks width-wise. And then let me remove fluid so you can see how this one looks. Okay, so that's the difference in the containers. And then we will be adding navigation. So a navigation bar is typically at the top of the page, and there's links to different action methods or different pages. And in a regular website, these links would be to different pages. Here, we'll be having it run through different functions in views and routing to different templates. So we'll talk about a couple different navbar styles. There is a horizontal navbar, which you can kind of see what that looks like. And the way you would set this up, you'd use the nav tag, you would have an unordered list, and then you would have your list items. In the navigation tag, you would set the class to navbar, and then you'd have navbar dash expand followed by a size setting. And the size can be small, medium, large, or extra large. Smaller and medium are probably more mobile friendly because they also work on a larger screen. And then in your UL, you'd have navbar dash nav for the class. And each line is going to have navbar dash item. Then if you have links, which I'm assuming that you would since it's a navigation bar, you would have class equal nav link. So how this looks is something like this. Okay, where you've got each line item, nav item, each anchor would have nav link. Okay, and then you can adjust the color using different commands that we'll look at in a minute. Okay, so here's kind of how that looks. This one is being impacted by styling that is in this page. So normally you don't actually get that kind of a hover effect. You can create a vertical nav bar. So it's basically all of the same classes, but you omit the navbar expand class. Just use navbar by itself. Now, quite often when you see navigation bars, you also see some kind of a brand or a logo, and that's normally at the beginning of the bar. And so you can insert a graphic there, a very small graphic, or you can do text. How you would add that is right below the nav tag. You would add like an anchor and with a class of navbar brand. And you can see this is a dummy anchor. It doesn't go anywhere. So if they click it, they're just going to stay on the current page. Okay, but that is how it was added. And then I just put in like a little title, but if you wanted to put a image in here, you could do that. Okay, and then everything else is pretty much the same. Now, typically, when you have one of these navigation bars and you are on a smaller screen, it actually displays collapse. So you don't see all the links like this. What you see is a hamburger, which is basically 3 lines. And you click those lines and then it expands and shows you the menu. Okay, so on like a phone, that is how it would appear. So, how do you code up that little hamburger? It's done through a button. And so you've got a button tag with a class set to navbar toggler. So basically, that class is set uh, to display the hamburger. And when you select it, it changes the display and it kind of opens up the panel. And then when you select it again, it closes up the panel. So you'll notice that we have navbar toggler. We set data toggle to collapse. That is the initial state. Then we have a data target. So you'll notice there's an ID here. This is important because it's identifying the menu that will display when you click on the hamburger. Okay, so that will connect to wherever your menu items are. Okay, and then for the icon, the hamburger itself, you're going to use this span tag with a class set to navbar toggler icon. So the key here to getting your menu to display is to take this ID, whatever you call it, and connect it to the section of your page that actually has your menu in it. And so we are going to be adding this to our base HTML template. And so this is how that would look in our app. So you can see I use navbar expand medium. I chose navbar light for the color. Background color is light. Have a border. Did a little margin on the bottom, and you'll be seeing all these commands later on. Then I did do a little brand. And you can see that I'm actually displaying a link for the brand, not a dummy link. And then I've got my hamburger button. And then I've got the section that I'm going to identify as the menu. Now, Bootstrap does utilize a grid system for responsive pages. It uses rows, and within rows, it uses column. So there's 5 different column sizes that you can use. There's just a col and a dash, a call dash small, medium, large, and extra large. So how this is going to work is very similar to grid view, for those of you that are familiar with grid view. Uh, if you have a medium-sized device and you want like a third of the width to be styled one way and a third or two-thirds the other way, you could do something like this. Container fluid. This is all done within a row, so you'd have the class set to row. And then you would have the first column uh, set to 4, the second column set to 8. And for those of you that aren't familiar with grid view, the columns need to add to 12. So it can be 4 and 8. It could be 6 and 6 if you wanted them even. You know, if you want the first one super small, it can be 2. The second one can be 10. The key is that they add up to 12. Okay, so I did include a link here to a try it yourself so you can kind of see how this works. So you can do a 2 and a 10 here. Even though the text is going to display wrong, you'll see the colored section change. So that's 2 and that's 10, and this is responsive. So, you know, if you make it smaller, you know, it will go down until it gets to a certain point and it just gets into like a mobile phone format. Here's another example. And you can see I've got red, white, and blue. And for this, I just set the class to column. So what it does is it does the columns, they are evenly sized and it makes them big enough to display the content. For headings, Bootstrap recognizes H1 through H6, and it has formatting that it applies to each. It also recognizes display headings. And so there are actually 4 different classes to choose from. And if you want to see how those look, you can see that you can actually add those display headings to your different heading tags, and it totally changes how that text looks. In addition to the size changes and the display settings, you can also incorporate the classes for margins and padding. MT is margin top, MR, margin right. Some of the code we looked at before had MB, which was margin bottom, margin left, or if you want all of the margins to be the same size, you can just use M. And then it's a dash and a size setting. And the size settings are 0 through 5. You can also use decimal places. So if you wanted like 1 1/4, you could do 1.25. Okay, so you can also do 0.5, which is about 50% less than the current size. So this is just something you have to play around with to determine what you like. Padding kind of works the same way. You got padding top, padding right, padding bottom, padding left, and then padding for all 4 sides. And again, the size values are 0 through 5, and decimals are allowed. As far as positioning your text, you can see you can left align, right align, or center. You can even modify the case. So you can do all lowercase, uppercase, or you can capitalize. These are all classes that you can apply inside your different HTML tags. And at this point, we are going to modify our base HTML. So we are going to be following along with the book. I'm going to go ahead and open up my base. And at the very top, so these are several pages worth of changes. So this is the first change at the top. I'm going to tell it to load up Bootstrap 4. Now, Bootstrap does require that your document use doc type HTML, which is for HTML5. So you do have to have this in whatever template you are pulling all of this into. And let's see, so I've got my head section I need to create. And then we'll do our meta name. Okay, and I don't think you guys all need to watch me, so I'm going to key in the content of the changes, all of the changes, and then we'll quick run through what they are. So at this point, I've keyed everything in. So I basically replaced the old page with this new page. And so kind of starting here from top to bottom, I pull in Bootstrap. I've got my meta tags saying how I'm encoding my page and indicating that it's mobile. Then I've got the title, and below that, I'm pulling in the Bootstrap CSS and the JavaScript and jQuery that it needs. And then in the body section, up at the top here, I've got my navbar. And so you can see I've added these different commands. We'll talk about some of the coloring commands in a minute. You can see here that I do have a brand, which is a link, and I do have that button that gives you the hamburger. And then for the target, I've got navbar collapse. And you can see here is a div tag with that same ID. So it is identifying this section as my navigation links. So here you can see for my UL, I've got navbar-nav, and I did change the margin on the right side to auto. Okay, and then it was just a matter of, adding the class for nav link to the various links. Now we are checking in here to make sure our user is authenticated. So we kind of kept that functionality in here that we had before. So if they are authenticated, we say hello. Otherwise, we kind of route them to the login page. Down here is where the main content is going to be. And the other pages, the other templates that we have, the content is going to go in this section. So you'll notice that we have class set to container, which kind of is required for all of your content areas. And then we've got some padding and margins set. We have a border on the bottom. Okay, and that's pretty much the styling that we've got going on here. So I'm going to go ahead and save. And in the next section, we're going to get into some of those color settings.